Hey guys, Joshua Barron here, your Vice President of IEEE UTSA, and today's workshop is a hardware overview of the Raspberry Pi. This one I have in front of me is the Pi Model 3, however the Pi 4 is out. I've used both the Pi 3 and the Pi 4 in two separate research projects, but the reason I'm using the Pi 3 for this video is because I only own a Pi 3. It's actually not my first Pi 3 either. I kind of killed my first one the very day I got it. I'll explain how later, but luckily it was only a $35 lesson to learn. The main differences between the Pi 3 and Pi 4 is that the Pi 4 has some USB 3.0, has two micro HDMI out instead of one full-sized, has USB-C for power in instead of USB micro B, has a faster processor, and has an option to get more RAM. So you can get 2 gigs or 4 gigs with the Pi 4, but they both cost more. Besides that, the basic layout's the same. You still get camera in and display in if you want to use their version of that. You also have the same GPIO pins, and they have pretty much the same layout. There's some slight differences I'll go into in a second. And then the micro SDs on the back, same with the Pi 4. For the GPIO, you really want to be careful with this. The reason I killed my first Raspberry Pi is because I touched the ground and the 5 volts. Don't know why they're next to each other. Don't ask me, I didn't design it. But if you touch these together, you can kill it, just like I killed mine. If you look in the parts bin, you might find mine on display. It's dead, so don't bother stealing it, because it was my bonehead mistake. Do not do the same. Be careful, and this is why you want to actually use a case, because you can still touch them from behind if you put it on a metal surface or whatever. Be careful. But the GPIO pin is a good thing. Don't get that wrong. This is why people actually love the Pi, because the Pi, you can do the cool things and the cool projects, right? You could plug in resistors, buttons, servos, and do those fun projects like you can with Arduino, but the Pi is a full-blown computer. You can run Windows on it if you wanted to. Wouldn't recommend it, be kind of slow. Most people actually run Linux, and they specifically run Raspbian OS. And I'll show you how to install that and run it next video. Speaking of the GPIO though, your basic UART for the serial command. You can also do UART commands over the USB. That's the S insert in USB, Universal Serial Bus. And then there's two different schemes of numbering these GPIO. There are 40 of them, but you can either go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way like that, or you can use, GPIO 12, 12 pin or GPIO 18, which is clock for PCM, right? It's either pin 10 or GPIO 15. Don't ask me why. If you're doing any kind of tutorial, make sure you're very careful on these because you don't want to mix them up. The GPIO actually stands for General Input Output, which you have to import into a Python library if you're going to use it. Anything else that I might want to mention is that the Pi 4 actually has 2 UART connections on the GPIO, which is super useful. That's why I had to use one for a different project, because we had more serial going out of it. But if you want to use the Pi 3 because you find it cheaper or whatever, go ahead. Besides that, it's basically the same. Speaking of a case, you definitely want one. You don't want to make the same mistake I did. Actually, the way I did it was not because of no case, it's because I was trying to use some cables from Arduino, which are male-to-male, instead of the female-to-male cables that this is supposed to come with. But I didn't have them in yet, so I was like, impatient, and definitely paid for it. The case is a toolless design. You kind of slide it in this way, clips in. You want to match up the portholes to the case. And if this is your first time, I would definitely recommend not putting on the heat sinks until after this step is done. The heat sinks are luckily really easy to put on. They just kind of like stick them on. But the first time I did it, I put them on, and then I tried to put the case on, and then it wouldn't go on because it didn't quite fit the clearance of the case. If you did it already and it's too late for you, it's okay, don't worry about it. The heat sinks are really easy to remove and put back on. But also, if you're putting this in, do not leave the SD card in. You can easily snap it and then either lose your data or just break the Raspberry Pi, which would be unfortunate. Also, SD cards fail. So if you're using an SD card that's off-brand, I wouldn't recommend it. Try Samsung or SanDisk. I've had lost data, and if it's an important project, you'll be in a lot of trouble. But if it is an important project, you should be backing up your data. I would definitely either email yourself the important code or just do a full backup, which I can do a video about later if you want me to. So the last thing you want to do is you put the lid on. The lid has a little groove right here for the air that you'll see goes in and out. But also you can use this right here to wire the cables out. See right here? That's thick enough to put wires through the Pi with the case on. I actually had to do this for one of my research projects. And so it still works. One thing you will notice if you do buy a Pi 4 with more gigs of RAM, so either 2 or 4, they tend to have cases with fans on them. That's because they run hotter because they have more RAM and they're faster. Last thing to do is plug in the SD card. There it goes facing you. And dang, you're done. Stay tuned for the next video where I show you how to boot up and install Raspbian on the microSD. Until then.